and they tried medication first, and it didn't it didn't do much. Didn't do hardly anything. Or she had bariatric surgery, so it makes it more difficult for someone like that once you get anemic. But uh, anyway, so she went to the doctor, uh, and the doctor finally said, "Well, that's all I can do." He said, "You need to go send her to an oncologist," which sounds scary, but they deal with people that are anemic from chemo and things like that generally do that. So let's see. Get to, oh, I hit that button. So so she went to an oncologist, and last week actually, and her iron level is like, it's not just low. The lady looked at her and said, and her red blood count's really low too. Everything else is good on it though, so it's not nothing serious. Nothing. You know, not type of cancer or anything like that. But she said, "I bet you're tired all the time." And Haley's like, "Yep." And said, "Well," so said you need an iron infusion, and said there's two methods. One method takes 30 minutes, but you have to wait 2 hours to make sure you didn't have a reaction afterwards. And then the other method is 6 hours, and you still have to wait about 2 hours after it to make sure you don't have a reaction. And so, I asked the question. I said, "Well, is one more effective than the other?" You know? And she goes, "Well, no." I said, "From everything I've read, they have about the same effectiveness." I said, "Well, it doesn't make much sense why you would do one, why you would do the 6 hour when you do the half hour." She said, "Well, it's all going to be an insurance. So hopefully your insurance does pay it." So most are now paying one of them, but sometimes they'll choose one or the other. So sure enough, the next day, last week, when uh, did the blood work, got submitted, and they called back, said, "Well, the insurance said they will pay, but they only pay for the 6 hour one." So they called her today, and she's got an appointment tomorrow morning at Mercy. So she will be there all day, hooked up to, I guess, you know, IV type stuff, feeding her with uh, iron type supplemented blood. And
Basically, using 6 hours to hopefully get her to refuse to do it.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's the half hour process is newer. And so there probably are not as many studies. Insurances are slow to adapt new things, even if they're better. And so my guess is that the 6 hour one's been around a long time. And so they're like, no problems, we'll just keep doing it. But the half hour from the lady, she said it's just as good, just newer. They can somehow they figured out how to do it in half hour instead of 6 hours. Well, so anyway, so she's got the 6 hour one. So uh, it's supposed to make you feel a lot better pretty quick. So hopefully she will, it'll kind of, so she's here. Well, we won't be here Wednesday because Thursday, Sophie has her second knee surgery. And so hopefully Haley will feel really good.
She's getting around pretty good right now with just a surgery on the one day.
Now, so she has some type of connective tissue disorder, which it's basically you have hypermobility in most of your joints. Um, Ehlers Danlos or something like that is the most common one. It's one most people know about, like a lot of your contortionists. That's what they have. So there is a 9-point test to see if you have hypermobility. If you can take your thumb, hold it like this, and bend it and touch your arm, that's one of them. So can y'all do that?
I can't do it.
If you can take your pinky and bend it back and touch the back of your hand. So your pinky to the back of your hand, that's another one. So the pinky finger all the way to the back of your hand. No, none of y'all. So that's two. There's 9 of them. And so y'all already have not done, let's see, if your knee can bend backwards more than a certain degrees, which she has no stop in her knees. So, although she does on the right one now that's been repaired, had a cadaver ligament installed. If you can, so not just touch your toes standing up, but if you can touch your palms to the ground, okay, that's one.
Do that.
Let's see. So each hand, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the other one is if your elbows can bend backwards more than 10 degrees. She does all 9 of them. She can do all 9 of them. And so anyway, so sometime this summer, we will have to go to a specialist that can decide what kind. Ehlers-Danlos, it has some repercussions sometimes on your organs and other things because the way your body contorts it, it's not good for a lot of your inside stuff. So it's best to know about it so they can treat it before you get a problem from it. So she is, so we're trying to find, there's one in Arkansas, Little Rock, that may do it. And so we're going to try to get an appointment with them. If not, we'll have to go to like Texas or the Mayo Clinic or something like that to get that evaluated. But simply, so her biggest issue recently has been she's got decent mobility now in her repaired knee and got a lot of strength. And so her recovery on the second knee should be better because she's got a strong knee. What was happening and what's happening, starting to be real bad with her left leg now, is so even in her sleep, if she moved any, her knee would just dislocate. Now, she used to say that, and we'd be like, there's no way your knee's just dislocating because, that's really painful. That would be, but her knee will just dislocate. And then she'll have to move it back in place. So her right leg got where it just did it all the time. She's going up down steps. It would dislocate. She'd have to pop it back. By the way, I've often said she can do the thing where you somehow contort your elbows behind you. You can clap them together. She can do that. Yeah. So anyway, it started doing that all the time. So they do this surgery, and it's a surgery. Most people have it done. They get injured in sports, and that's why they have to have it done. They get, land wrong. Anyway, they hyperextend or they get it from the side and they dislocate the knee, and then they have to do the surgery because it, broke everything loose, and so it tightens it up. She did this from genetics, so her left leg's starting to get that point where it's starting to just. So a lot of her recovery's been a little slower because her left leg's not really strong enough to do a lot of stuff they would do because she's having to do everything pretty much one-legged. So when she gets to surgery on this one, it should go quicker because she'll have one good leg. Although there is a good chance she may have to have multiple surgeries on that because it may be something in 10, 20, 30 years, because her body is so flexible, it will gradually get flexible again. And so they'll have to do it probably again some point in her life or possibly. So anyway, but it's kind of freaky, some of the things she can do because, when she does the thing with her thumb or her pinky, it's just like, how, I mean, I could do that, but it would really hurt because I'd have to dislocate. Well, I keep joking with her. One of these days, I'm going to buy her a straight jacket.
See if she can get out of it.
Yeah, see, she got, because her shoulder, she can dislocate her shoulder too. And so, and my guess is she would be one of the people that handcuffs wouldn't work on her because she can move that thumb to where her hand is smaller than her wrist. So they would just slide right on off. They say if you break, you can, if you got the gumption, you could break your, the thumb there and possibly you could probably get out of your handcuffs that way, but she can just do it just by moving it. So anyway, so we will see on that, but she's worried about the surgery right now because anyway, even though she's had the other one and it should be just fine. But so anyway, let's turn to 1 Kings 11. So I will have a busy week this week. 1 Kings 11. talks about Solomon, and now the Lord has raised adversaries. And because Solomon's heart had gone away because of all these women. Now, what I want to go down to, though, is chapter 11 and verse 26. Jeroboam the son of Nebat. And reason I want to talk about this is because Jeroboam becomes maybe one of the most infamous people who ever lived. And it's because of his things that he decided to do. In fact, he is so associated with doing evil that every king that does evil is compared to him. A lot of times they'll say, well, they did evil all the days of their life, but not quite to the level of evil that Jeroboam the son of Nebat did. So, that's, you're really not a good person when things like that are said. Now, Jeroboam's going to be the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel when it divides. Of course, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. So it says in verse 26, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zeradah, a servant of Solomon, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also lifted up his hand against the king. And if you read before this, now, in general, Solomon's reign was a time of peace, but at some point it wasn't. He had people that tried to rise up against him. He didn't have wars in the sense that other countries were trying to attack Israel, but he had internal conflicts where people basically tried to depose him or just did things against him. Jeroboam was an Ephraimite. Now, Ephraim, you had Manasseh and Ephraim. They were a little different as far as the tribes of Israel go. What was unique about Ephraim and Manasseh? So do y'all know the sons of Jacob, the tribes of Israel? You got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. Okay? Everybody can say that? We need to do the Bible booster for adults is what we need to do. But so Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. Last two were the ones born of Rachel. She died giving birth to Benjamin. Joseph was also a child of Rachel and Jacob. Kind of the one that got the coat of many colors and everything. So Ephraim and Manasseh, they received land allotments as tribes. Well, we know Levi didn't get land. Levi was the priestly tribe, and so they were given some cities, but they were dispersed throughout the whole land because they were the tribe that would help the priest and tribe of the priest. So that would give you then 10, 11, but where's the 12th one come? But if you notice on the land allotments, let's go to a map. Let's just look at a map. Let's go back to a map. Okay, map number 4. Okay, everybody to map 4.
4.
4.
4. Okay.
Okay, map 4. Are you map 4 on yours?
Here says map 4.
Okay, it just didn't color this nice. So anyway, it's got the 12 tribes in Canaan. Now let's see if we can find them. So Reuben, the oldest son, you find Reuben.
This is on a different page.
Oh, okay. What is that map for them?
Uh,
Oh, you got an extra map or something. Okay. It's still colored different. That's fine. So find Reuben. Where is Reuben at? Okay. Everybody find Reuben. It's on the east side of the Dead Sea or Jordan River.
Close to the bottom.
Yeah.
What is it?
Reuben.
Oh,
Reuben. Yeah, we're going to find all the tribes. Yeah.
Seen it a minute ago. There it is.
Okay, Reuben. Reuben was the eldest son. Reuben got some of the land. When they began to conquer the land, they kind of took this land before they really went to the other side of the Jordan was what was really always talked about. But these went ahead and got land there, but they sent soldiers to help fight for the other land. So Reuben is on this side. Reuben, once again, the oldest son. What about Simeon? Can you find Simeon? Okay, so Simeon is. Now, do you know anything interesting about Simeon?
Kind of landlocked.
Yeah, it's a donut hole, is it not? Now, I know in my days from city engineering and from city planning, you don't ever do that. Like if you have a commercial zone, you wouldn't want a donut hole of residential inside the. You just don't do that. It doesn't make sense. It should be you go from one to the other. So it's in donut hole. What's interesting about it? So we said that Levi did not get a land tribe. Now, which two sons of Jacob? Remember when Dinah was raped, and then they decided that he wanted her to have her for a wife, and they went to Jacob and to his sons. They said, I think it was Shechem, and said, I want her from wife. And they said, okay, we'll let you have her wife. But what did they require these men to do? All the men?
Be circumcised.
Be circumcised. And so on the day after several days when the most pain would have been, they went and killed them all. Which two sons of Jacob did that? If you ever forget, all you got to do is the two that really didn't get long-term land allotments. So we said one of them was who? Levi. So Levi was one of the two. Simeon was the other one. What's interesting about Simeon, at some point, Simeon becomes assimilated, and it just becomes the tribe of Judah. Okay? So at some point, there is no more Simeon, tribe of Simeon. These are details. They still will refer to the 12 tribes and other things, but at some point, Simeon, and by the way, by this time that we're talking about when these nations divide, it's already done. Simeon has been assimilated. There is no more pure tribe of Simeon by the time of Solomon. But anyway, so Simeon, we find Simeon. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, we've talked about Judah. Judah's the big one, by the way, especially after Simeon gets assimilated. So you see Judah? You're way too north.
just above Simeon.
The principal city of Judah is Jerusalem. So, yeah. So who all come from the tribe of Judah? Well, we know Judah did. But who else? So you've got another little town just south of Jerusalem called Bethlehem. So what central people, key people in the Bible do we know came from Bethlehem?
Jews.
Well, they were all Jews. Yeah, but who came from Bethlehem? Who was born in Bethlehem? Jesus was, but who else? In fact, it was called his city.
David.
Yeah, David. So David, that's where David was from. Bethlehem is where Jesus would be born as well. So we've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan. Can you find Dan?
Little bitty pink.
Little bitty pink, yes. Yeah, there you go. It kind of makes a little bit of a curve too.
Yeah.
By the way, here's an interesting one. There's also a little bit of it very north, that thing of Dan. Remember it's in the Judges. It's one of the weirdest accounts in the whole book Bible, in my opinion, where you had one of the grandsons of Moses. And I forget from what tribe they made him a priest. They had this household God thing. They made this shrine and they set up the grandson of Moses to be priest over that. And these people from Dan, they were looking for more land from where they lived. They came through there and they basically took this guy and made him priest in Dan. So anyway, Dan also had a piece up there. So Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali. He's fine Naphtali. Okay. Then Gad. Gad's another one on the east side of Jordan. Okay, so Gad, Issachar. It's a fairly small one.
Just above Jezreel, right on the Jordan River. And
And I left off Asher, by the way. Asher, you see Asher too? It's up north too. By the way, some of these at some point no longer was part of Israel. Even Reuben, Gad, and we'll get to their East Manasseh. That section there is now modern day Jordan. Anyway, so Asher, let's see. Have I got them? Issachar, Zebulun. I said Issachar. Did we get Issachar? Okay, Issachar, Zebulun. You find Zebulun? It's another little bitty pink one, or small pink one.
right there is joins Issachar.
Okay, we're going to skip to the last one. Benjamin. Find Benjamin? It became a fairly small tribe because of the civil war they had against the rest of Israel. The priest that cut up it was his concubine that got raped and killed, and he cut her body in 12 parts and sent it all over. Anyway, started a civil war, and Benjamin lost a lot of their men. And so, anyway, so Benjamin, you find Benjamin? It's, yeah. Okay, so that's 11 Levi's, So where's Joseph? Joseph was the son of Jacob.
Not on there.
Not on there. Where'd he go? Did he do something wrong? Did Joseph do something wrong?
He was over in Egypt.
I thought he was. Well, yeah, but I thought he was
in Egypt, wasn't he?
Well, and all of them were in Egypt. They all died in Egypt, and then they come out after the Exodus. So did he do something wrong? I thought he was the one that did so much right.
Do they remain the same names today in this country?
No, these tribes wound up. No one can accurately say what tribe they're from now because all those records were destroyed in 80, 70.
Didn't wind up in the Dead Sea, did he?
No. So, what if I give you a hint? I say, if you notice, there's some other lands on here, though. So, Joseph. Now, Judah's the one that gets the promise of the kings that would come, and the Messiah would come to him. But, so, Reuben did not get the status of firstborn in any way. What if I told you Joseph, in essence, got the status of the firstborn? What would that mean? What did it mean to get the status of the firstborn?
Get the status of what?
If you had the status of being the firstborn, what did that allot you?
We got the land.
Double.
Double. Okay, that's a hint. So Joseph gets a double portion. Well, what about some of these lands here? I see a land. We not only have Manasseh, we have East Manasseh, which that was just some of them wanted to go ahead and pick up place and do it, and they wound up having both sides. And then you got Ephraim. Okay, we haven't mentioned those names, have we? Where did they come from? Anyone remember? With the hint that Joseph got the double portion. So he wasn't left off. In essence, gets 2 pieces of land. So who are Ephraim and Manasseh? And here's an interesting take too. When Jacob's dying in Genesis 4:9, he's giving out all these prophecies and everything. He says to Joseph, talking about his 2 sons, that they're going to get land. The oldest one was Manasseh. The youngest one was Ephraim, but Jacob says the youngest one will be preeminent over the oldest, kind of like him and Esau. And so that's Ephraim. Now, you say, wait a second, if I look at this, Manasseh has a whole lot more land than what Ephraim does. When Israel divides, northern and southern, Ephraim becomes the central tribe of the northern kingdom. And some of these I've seen a little differently. Samaria, likely by the time of the division, was part of Ephraim. And so sometimes the northern tribe is just simply called Samaria. Sometimes it's called the northern kingdom. Sometimes it's called Israel. So anyway, so Manasseh and Ephraim are sons of Joseph. Joseph received a double portion, and so it was given to his 2 sons. So that's just something you always need to be mindful of. So we talk about the 12 tribes, and that's true, but one of them didn't get land, and one of them, Simeon, is going to be assimilated. So by the time of Solomon, Simeon was likely no more at this time. Most of the other tribes probably were there, but very different. So anyway, so the point going through that, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, was from what tribe? Ephraim. Mm-hmm. By the way, if you look at the numbers of the tribes, as far as, not size, land area wise, so in the U.S., is the largest state the most populous state?
Yeah.
Not even the second largest state is the most populous. And you got states like Wyoming that has almost nobody in there, in Montana. So just because land area wise they're bigger, Judah was almost always the largest tribe when they would do a count or a census. Ephraim was a lot of times the second largest. So Judah and Ephraim were generally the 2 dominant tribes. There were some good people from Ephraim. Joshua was from Ephraim. And so anyway, so we see a lot of things that come from that. It's good to, like I say, you don't have to have these things memorized, but you kind of need to know why they're allotted the way they are. By the way, by the time the kingdoms divide, there probably wasn't quite the... Now, originally in the law of Moses, it was said that you needed to try to preserve the land being owned by the tribe. So there was rules. So your sons, even if they married someone from another tribe, they would stay in their tribe, and that became where they would be. The daughters would then sometimes go to other tribes, but the sons would stay, so the name would hold that tribe. Now, that was in the law of Moses. How much of the law did they follow consistently throughout time?
Not much.
Not much. So over time, obviously, the purity of the tribes lost a little bit of that. So it became more just, especially when they're divided, you had more just the northern and southern. Now, it's still referred to the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes, although that is really, so So Simeon wasn't really a tribe anymore. But if you counted it, that's a tribe. So when they divide, Simeon would have to be included in Judah because it was inside Judah. And then you had Benjamin, but you also had all the Levites, and we'll find out why. They all come down to the southern. So you, in essence, had 4 tribes, or maybe if you said there still existed 3 tribes. And so the north is a lot of times called the 10 tribes, but they only had 8. So what does that tell you about the numbers? When we start talking about them later times, about the 10 and the 2 and things like that. What does it tell you about them?
It's not that important.
Well, how would we classify that? Because they're still used that way. Would we not say that's a figurative style language? Because we all knew about the original 12, and so figuratively, 2 were let.
Is in it. It's just
Yes, it's looking back in time the way it was meant to be, but yet it wasn't at the time that it divided. So I just want to point that out. Just know it. So when you see it, you do. Okay. So anyway, he also went up against apparently something about this Millo. Do y'all remember why I said Millo meant? Says this was the reason why he lifted his hand against the king. In verse 27, Solomon built the Millo and closed up the breach of the city of David, his father. What was the Millo?
I can't think of it on I remember it being mentioned.
We live close to a town that got its name because it built something like that. How did the largest town in River Valley get its name? It doesn't stand anymore. It's not there anymore. That's how the town got its name, though. They built something. What did they build? Fort. Yeah, built a fort. And so Solomon built a fort, Millo. Now, it doesn't really explain, and it's pure speculation why this irritated Jeroboam. It could be that he wanted a part in it. It could be that he didn't feel it's needed. Whatever it may be, it irritated Jeroboam, and so he became an enemy of Solomon. Verse 28 says, the man Jeroboam was very able. And when Solomon saw that young man was industrious, he gave him charge over the forced labor of the house of Joseph. Once again, what was the house of Joseph? What was it divided into? 2 tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. Where was Jeroboam from? This would make sense. He was from Ephraim. So it makes sense that he'd be put in charge of something that he was familiar with. And at that time, Jeroboam went out to Jerusalem, and prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, just means he was from Shiloh. A lot of the prophets at that time, that's where they were, even all the way back from Samuel and even before. And it says he found him on the road. Now, Ahijah had dressed himself in a new garment, and 2 of them were alone the open country. Then Ahijah laid hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. What would that represent? 12 tribes. And said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces. Now, this is where I wanted to explain. This is figurative, okay? 10 represented the north. South was represented by Judah and Benjamin, although Simeon had done been assimilated. So but it works in an imagery standpoint. 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord of God of Israel, behold, I am about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon and will give you 10 tribes. But he shall have 1 tribe for the sake of servant and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. So it would be Judah and Benjamin that would stay together. It says, because they have forsaken me, worship Ashtaroth, the gods of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, Milcom, the god of the Ammonites, and they have not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and keeping my statutes and my rules as David my father did. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David, my servant, whom I choose, who kept my commandments and my statutes. Boy, is Solomon lucky that he had David as a father. And because of this, Solomon would not actually live to see the kingdom divided. And it's because of David. But after Solomon dies, it's going to be torn apart. It says, but I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand and give it to you, 10 tribes. Yet to his son I will give 1 tribe, that David my servant may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen to put my name. What does that mean that he chose to put his name there? By the way, in the law of Moses, we're told that God would choose a place to put his name, and that this is the place where all males would have to gather 3 times a year for the different special feast days in the law of Moses. So what does it mean, the city where I've chosen to put my name? What was put there? Temple in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was the city God chose to put his name, and had a special toll. So, when you get back to the argument that the woman at the well had with Jesus, was a discussion about, the Jews say you are to worship Jerusalem. We say worship in the high places. Well, the Jews were right, but Jesus was wanting to convey something more important about what's about to happen. And, it ultimately doesn't matter where we worship now. We don't have to go to Jerusalem. Isn't that nice? Imagine how expensive that would get 3 times a year to go to Jerusalem and stay there. Says, and if you will listen to all here's the big but, is it not? Yeah, condition. He's got conditions for Jeroboam. If you will listen to all that I command you and will walk in my ways and do what is right in my eyes and keep my statutes and my commandments as David, my servant, did, I will be with you, and I'll build you a sure house as I built for David, and I will give Israel to you, and I will afflict the offspring of David because of this, but not forever. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. Okay? But Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Saul. So somehow Solomon got wind that Jeroboam had been given this promise, and so in his mindset this time, I'll just kill him then he can't inherit anything. Well, obviously it didn't happen that way. But what's interesting is he told Jeroboam, if you'll follow my ways, my statutes, your kingdom will be sure, basically just like I told David. What that means is it will always be in his family. Now we're going to see Jeroboam doesn't hold up to the promise. And as a result, what do you think eventually is going to happen to his family line? They're going to be cut off from the throne at some point. Now, when God says things like this, it doesn't mean immediate, does it? But it does happen at some point, fairly quickly down the family line. And so next week, we'll begin with Ecclesiastes. And I like Ecclesiastes because according to Ussher's timeline, the events that take place here and the events that take place in Ecclesiastes may be 8 years from this. Ecclesiastes is less than 4 years from the time that Solomon dies. So that gives more than enough time for Solomon to come to an understanding that he does in the book of Ecclesiastes. So the Solomon we just saw decided, well, I'll just kill Jeroboam. The Solomon that had left his heart, removed his heart from God, can a lot change in 8 years? by the way, I didn't point out the good news we had last night. So as we're getting ready to lock up and stuff, and Steve and Jennifer are still around, and we talked to them, and we got word that Selena was coming, and Selena Reed, Jordan's wife, and she was going to be baptized. So we waited around. And we asked them, okay, I said, oh yeah. So we waited around, and so Selena came. Kenneth and Cassie were there. All the kids. I guess about the only one that wasn't there was Megan. I think she had to go to work. She works at nights. And so they were there. Well, Carly wasn't there either. I don't know. But anyway, so they were all there, and Steve baptized her. And so that was sweet. But, I'm thinking about the way things could have went with her and with Jordan. They didn't start off the right way. I just don't need to go into any of that. But the point is, a lot has changed. And that's been a lot less than probably 10 years or about that. So can a lot change with people's regard to their attitude towards God in an 8-year time?
Yeah.
It don't even take sometimes 8 years, does it? No. So the point is, so all this bad we've said about Solomon, when you look at all this in context, when we get to Ecclesiastes, we're talking about someone that is now old, much older, and has understood the error of his ways. Okay. And so with that mindset, Ecclesiastes makes perfect sense, all the things he goes through. And you think about how much wealth, how many wives, how much prosperity, how much, wisdom he was associated with up to this time. You get to the book of Ecclesiastes, and we see a totally different individual. And so, but he's had all these life experiences. Something I've observed in myself in my preaching. So there'd be times I used to, like I'm sure Larry's done it before, got up and delivered a lesson or whatever. And, I went to a school of preaching, and I noticed, my information was always very scriptural, but, the little critiques that they'd always have is, well, you need to have some illustrations. You need to have some, personalized, something about your life. And I used to think, well, and my dad, I looked at my dad when he preached, and he was so good at telling stories about his life that he would weave into his lessons. I thought, man, he's really good. And I got to thinking, I'm becoming more and more like my dad. Seems like every year goes by. And, the things, the life, but a lot of it is life experiences you have. So there are things that means a lot more to me from scripture now than when I was a 20-something-year-old man, because I had not yet had the life experiences to really understand the ups and downs and the problems of how rough that can be. And so, as I've always thought you can tell a difference between a preacher that has been preaching for a long time and one that's not. Now, the young preachers, they have something different. They a lot of times have a really good zeal, enthusiasm, and they can be really knowledgeable. But when it comes to life experiences, if you went to the
guy from Washington.
Yeah, Washburn, and even if you listen closely, hit home to me, the guy at Valley View talking about apparently the situation with his son has apparently fallen away. And, that is something that comes as you've had life experiences. So it's not that the young preacher is bad. No, I'm not trying to imply that. In fact, I love the younger preachers to hear that enthusiasm, that, it's kind of like you listen to high school kids when they graduate, the world, they can accomplish anything. They got these dreams. They're going to do this, do that. And, the realist in you says, that's likely not going to happen. This is going to happen, and your plans are going to change. But there is that sense of seeing in that excitement and hope of things. It is, it's very beneficial. But there's something about an older preacher that has lived life, and you can see it. That's what Ecclesiastes is. So some people won't get Ecclesiastes has been my favorite book of the Bible, or at least of the Old Testament, for a long time. And I remember I was at a church when I was still a young man. I'd started school of preaching, but I wasn't yet, preaching or anything. And this youth director, they were taking turns, him and the main minister. They was on Wednesday nights doing a book of the Bible, and he got with Ecclesiastes, and he goes, well, I have to tell you, he said, it's my least favorite book. And once again, I said, it's my, one of my favorites. And he said, it's his least favorite. He said, to me, the person that wrote this is bipolar, because he's talking. And I'm like, you don't get it. You don't understand what he's been through. And so it's good we've done it in this order, and we're going to try to continue this. When we come across time for certain prophets, we'll take a segue and talk about that prophet. But we can understand, because of this, that Solomon did start out such great hope, and yet because of his prosperity, his wisdom, it led him away from God, and he realizes that that's worthless. Those things don't matter. And so we're going to be able to appreciate it more, I think, by going through and seeing it in context. Okay. Any questions or comments? But exciting, I like stories or accounts. You have people like David. Yeah, they stumbled, but they didn't stay down very long. They always repented. And, you've got stories of people like Joseph, who, really there's nothing we can concretely say. He was just wrong the way he acted, the wrong way he did. And you got stories of Daniel, who seemed to always do what was right. But there's something about someone like Solomon. Yeah, he went way off. But apparently he realized the error of his ways. And, I think it's important that we understand that we're all going to make mistakes even after we become Christians. That's not the standard we're held by. We're held by what standard of when we return. Do we learn from those mistakes we make in our life? And even if you're talking about a non-Christian, that's really a sign of someone that matures, is someone that really makes some big mistakes, but then realizes I was wrong. To me, it's just even more beautiful when it's someone that's a believer in God that realizes that that's not the way and comes back. And how powerful it is that someone who is wealthy, someone is powerful, someone has seemingly had it all, realized that without God, it didn't mean anything. So we'll go through fairly quick, but Ecclesiastes is a great book when we understand it from that perspective. Someone that's been there, done it, had everything, and realized that none of that really mattered. When you're lying on your deathbed, it doesn't really matter to you how much money you got in your bank account, how big your fortune is, how many things you accomplished in life. What's going to be important is how you're going to be prepared. How have you prepared for the next life? Yes.